I think the bottom line here, and the reason we wanted to bring this up within the context of the webinar on families is it relates to spending, right? We're seeing spending concentrated into a smaller and smaller share of U.S. households. This number shocked me, but a recent study done by Ad Age reported that about 10% of U.S. households, they believe, now account for nearly 50% of consumer spending in the U.S. So where could this head in the future? U.S. consumer markets could further diverge into a sort of a well-off tier and a value-driven tier. We've seen this emerge to some degree as a consequence of the recession, but what we're talking about is seeing this potentially solidify into a more stratified market with a permanently smaller middle class. There may also be some health impacts. Life expectancy has actually been dropping among certain populations and in certain regions in the U.S. In recent years, and some analysts are drawing the line between the income inequality in the country and our declining health status. And finally, I think the more bifurcated U.S. consumer market, coupled with global companies' focus on emerging market consumers, it actually has some journalists asking if U.S. businesses might be learning to basically get by without the U.S. middle-class consumers. Now, this may be a bit of an exaggeration, but there's some data suggesting that it's not too far off point. Large pharma companies expect to get 70% of their future business from emerging markets. China is now the largest car market in the world. General Electric expects that emerging markets are going to provide 60% of its revenue growth through 2020. So I guess one of the takeaways from all this talk of economic drivers and the volatility and uncertainty and income inequality, one thing I think it implies is that consumers are going to need your support. They need to feel that the brands that they connect with are genuinely trying to help them and will stick with them. We've all probably heard the example talked up before in the last couple of years, but it's why that Hyundai Assurance Plan, which allowed the car buyers to return their car if they lost their job, was so brilliant. In the first year of the program, they didn't have that many people taking them up on it. Only about 100 cars were returned, but it really did give them a big boost. It gave them credibility, helped ally them with consumers and their struggles in a real and tangible way. So I think helping our consumers feel more secure in an environment when there's going to be a lot of uncertainty and change, both domestically and in terms of global dynamics, is really going to be important moving forward in the coming years. Moving on from economics, we're going to see some changing demographics, of course, as another big macro force that's going to change the context for American families. We have generational changes afoot, and the two generations that largely shaped the last half century in the U.S., seniors and boomers, will increasingly give way to the influence of Gen Xers and millennials. Of course, this is an ongoing process. It's underway. It's been underway, but it's going to happen to an increasing degree in the workplace and in consumer markets. We're also going to see a wholly new generation emerge. Generation Z, the one after millennials, will be a key demographic of interest in the future. They're going to be the most diverse generation to date. They're going to raise the current bar set by millennials for diversity. They're going to raise the current bar set by millennials for the sort of totally wired and always-on digital native youth behaviors. And the precise boundaries of Generation Z are still being debated, but basically the oldest of this generation will be roughly in their late teens, around 2020. There are also going to be ethnic shifts, and as I noted before, we paid some special attention in our research recently to the Hispanic population in the U.S., and basically did this because the size of the market is just growing so much. The 2010 census really showed us that the Hispanic American population was growing faster than previously expected, and in fact, Hispanics were responsible for 56% of U.S. population growth during the 2000s, and about 1 in 5 of all kids under 5 are Hispanic. Right, so clearly the momentum is there for the future. Claudia is going to talk to us more about that in a little bit, and we look forward to that. In general, I think these demographic shifts point, of course, to greater diversity in family situations and family makeup and family experience. There are going to be new style leaders and sources of social influence. Millennials are going to dominate parenting and family formation in the next decade. Teen culture of 2020 is going to be shaped by Generation Z, a generation that we're still sort of really starting to just figure out where their priorities are and how they're being shaped by their life experience. And it really, I think, over the longer term, we're going to move away from the idea of a majority and minority groups. And, I think you've probably all heard the statistic that the U.S. is on track to be a majority-minority by 2042. And I know that kind of feels like a long way off, but the key thing to remember is that this trend is really going to take hold with kids first. And American kids, 18 and under, are actually on track to be majority-minority by 2023. That's well within the time horizon that we think about at Innovaro and that we hope that you all are considering as well in your planning. One last area I want to touch on is technology. It's clear from the changes we've seen in the last decade or two that consumer life and family life is being altered forever by technology. No escaping that. We expect that to intensify. At the macro level, it's becoming more central to family life. And even the recession didn't seem to greatly interrupt the adoption of new tech by families. They may have given up other things, but generally it didn't slow down in terms of tech adoption. Tech's being applied to a range of things: household management and scheduling. It's changing how families capture and share memories with friends and relatives. And perhaps the biggest driver of tech use in the family right now is the desire to keep up and connect with family members. And this is especially true for groups like seniors who have traditionally been tech laggards. So they're sort of in catch-up mode now. And I love this picture on the screen now. It's a picture of grandparents, spending a little FaceTime with a new granddaughter. That just sort of sums up, where we are, I think, with technology and with the way families are connecting. We've discussed the idea of the empowered consumer in our New Dimensions of Consumer Life series and some of the briefs on transparency. We really believe that over the next decade, things like the mainstreaming of smartphones, geolocation technology, augmented reality, social shopping, but all this is going to drive further transparency into consumer and to family life. We're also going to see the idea of the sort of silver digital divide quickly become outdated. It already is starting to become outdated as older Americans continue to take to technology. I think it's all but going to disappear during the next decade. And finally, certain technologies are frankly going to redefine and expand our definition of family. This is particularly true of reproductive technologies, which, as we all know, are becoming more commonly used. We're already seeing things like adoptive parents preparing 2 sets of baby books for their kids, so when the kids get older, they can learn about their genetic parents and the parents that raised them. Other families that have used, sperm or egg donations are faced with having to decide the kind of relationships that their kids will or won't have with half-siblings that may exist in other families in other parts of the country or the world. So I think one thing that implies that choice is going to become more important in the way that people define their families, and the family tree is going to come to encompass both one's genetic family and one's emotional family or chosen family, more so than it does today. It's going to become more common, more accepted, and overall the family tree is going to be more fluid and flexible. And that's probably a pretty good segue to the topic that Kristen is going to cover, which is emerging family types and trends in marriage. Kristen, I'm going to give you just a second to get settled and then turn the mic to you.